Hi, today I will show you how to play Dragonfish. Dragonfish is a quick and fun game about addition, subtraction and spatial thinking. The game is for children aged 7 and up, and it can be played with 2 to 4 players. Let's take a look what's inside the box and how to get started with the game. In the box there are cards and manual pages. There are 2 manuals, one in English and one in French. Here you can read the details of the games. Using a QR code, you can get access to our online material where we'll be uploading more manuals in different languages. There are 2 types of cards. There are water pond cards or just pond cards. These have a blue back. These will always be on the table and never on your hand. And then there are green helper cards. They have a green back and they will either be on the table or in your hand, depending on which type of card it is. Now, in step 2, a player has to attempt to complete a calculation in one of the ponds. A calculation in a pond consists of pointing to a numbered card and trying to reach that number using other numbered card in the pond by using addition or subtraction. So typically I will try to point to a fish and try to reach that number using other bug cards. These are the bug cards. In a calculation there can only be at most one fish card. So let's take an example. So I'm going to point to this fish 10 and say 10 equals 7 plus 3, and that is my calculation. And once the calculation done and it is approved, I can take these cards, I discard these, and I actually get to claim the fish. Now I've caught this fish. And then I replenish the pond with new cards. The blue pond cards have 3 groups of cards. There are the bug cards, which have a light blue foreground, and each of the cards has a number. Then there are the bicycle cards. They don't have a number, but they're still a light blue foreground. And finally, there are the fish cards. They have a dark blue foreground, and they have a number. Think of the number as the weight of the fish. So this one would be kind of 30, or think of it as fish points. The aim of the game is to collect fish points, a certain number depending on how many participants there are in the game. And since it's about collecting fish, the background is dark because they're easier to spot. All the blue pond cards will always be on the table and never on your hand. Now, to set up the game, shuffle the 2 types of cards. So the helper cards and the pawn cards. First, let's take the helper cards, and here we'll continue flipping until we've found 4 canal cards. 1, 2, that was a fish card, a hook card, 3, and 4. So now these will be put in a square. Anyway, we can also put it this way, and you can see how some canals will be forming. But you can put it in any fashion you want. Next, we'll take the pond cards and we'll have to create 4 ponds. And these will be 2 by 3. So we'll take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have a 2 by 3 pond. And we'll create one more here. And I'll just continue here outside the frame. And finally, the last and 4th pond. So we see we actually have some fish here. We have bicycle, and what you maybe cannot see is, let's just move it up, there was actually also fish here. So this is how we set up the game. So an island with some canals and 4 pawns. Each player takes turns playing. A turn consists of 2 steps. The first step is about drawing a green helper card or using a green helper card you may have at hand. The next step is try to perform a calculation within one of the pawns. Let's look at the first step. In step 1, a player can either pick a card from the green stack or play a green card they may have at hand. Let's look at the case where we pick a card from the stack. If it's a light green card, it must be played immediately. It could also have been a dark green card, like a hook. This card may be played immediately, or I can choose to keep it. And finally, it could also have been the last type of card we have, which is green, dark green, a pair of scissors. This card must be kept. It cannot be played immediately. It has to be played against an opponent that first throws a hook, and then I can counter it with the scissors. So this was the case when we draw a card from this stack. The other case in step 1 could be, instead of drawing a card from the green help card stack, assume that I have a green card at hand, and let's say in this case it's a fishing hook. Then I may play that against an opponent, and let's assume the opponent has, let's say, these 2 fish and has a card on hand. So this fish hook I can play against the fish of size 5 but not 15, because 10 is less than 15. So I can try to claim that fish. Now, player 2, let's see, could, in this case, actually has a pair of scissors, so player 2 can actually counter my hook and cut the line, in which case, when playing this, it cancels the fishing hook and these are thrown out. Player 2 could also choose to let me catch the fish, in which case I can claim it, and this card is discarded. Now, in step 2, a player has to attempt to complete a calculation in one of the pawns. A calculation in a pawn consists of pointing to a numbered card and trying to reach that number using other numbered card in the pawn by using addition or subtraction. So typically I will try to point to a fish and try to reach that number using other butt cards. These are the butt cards. In a calculation, there can only be at most 1 fish card. So let's take an example. So I'm going to point to this fish, 10, and say 10 equals 7 plus 3. And that is my calculation. And once the calculation done and it is approved, I can take these cards, I discard these, and I actually get to claim the fish. Now I've caught this fish. And then I replenish the pond with new cards. Now in step 2, I actually have an option. So before attempting to complete a calculation in a pond, I may use the canals. And the canals actually extend a swim lane. So we actually have a straight line going here. That's a swim lane. There's one going here. And there's one going straight down here. And it gives me the chance, before trying to make the calculation, to maybe reshuffle some cards if I can see there's an opportunity. So let's say I want this fish of 15. I cannot complete the calculation here because I'm not allowed to use 5 plus 5 plus 5 equal 15, because that's a fish card and then I have 2 fish cards. But then I spot that maybe I can use the swim lane to exchange this card, which swims along this line, this swim lane, and swap places with this card, which swims up. Now, let me see if I can do a calculation. So I would like to claim number 15, the fish, and the calculation would be 8 plus 2 plus 5 gives 15. I claim the fish, I discard these, and I fill up the pond with fresh cards. finally, if I don't seem to be able to find any calculations using the canals even, I may just choose to pass my turn and then let the next player attempt to make a calculation. Now that we've seen all cards, let's try to summarize how we use the helper cards. So assume we have two players and I've shown the cards they have at hand, the helper cards. Normally you would not show it to the opponent, but to make it easy I've just shown them here. So player 1 has a pair of scissors and a fishing hook of 20, and player 2 has a fishing hook of 20. So recall, when it's a player's turn, there's always a step 1 and possibly a step 2. So let's see what happens here. So in step 1 we draw this one. So assume this player drew a fishing net. Actually what it allows is to empty one of the ponds. It has to be played immediately. So let's just say I empty this pond, and in fact I can only empty the animals. The bicycle has to stay. So let's replenish the pond here. And now I can attempt to make a calculation. Okay, let's assume instead that I drew this one, a canal card. Again, it has to be played immediately. So in this case, maybe I want to build a canal this way, so I simply exchange this card with this one. And now I can attempt to make a calculation. Let's assume instead maybe I drew this one, a magnet. It's a light green, so I have to play it immediately. And here we have a bicycle, so I can play it against the bicycle, and I can actually empty the bicycle. So that we remove. And we replenish here. Finally, let's see, had I drawn this card, which means the rotate card, I would have to play it immediately. So I would leave my cards here and leave these, and the two players would actually rotate. So player 1 gets over here and gets this card, and player 2 came from here and actually inherited these cards. So this was the rotate card. Now assume instead of drawing a card, maybe let's say this player looked at this player over here. Let's assume this player had a few fish here. So let's assume this player has been catching a lot of fish. Now this player could, instead of drawing, could actually choose to play this card and would point to maybe take the largest fish. And since this player does not have a pair of scissors, he cannot prevent this player from getting the fish. So we discard this one here. In the opposite, had it been this player that played 20 to catch this fish, this player could have countered it, cut the rope or the fishing line and cancelled out and actually keep the fish. Now, if you play a fishing hook and you successfully catch a fish, let's assume I did this here. It was my turn. I claim this fish. I can take this fish. Then this step 1 basically terminates my turn. So if I catch a fish, I'm not allowed to also attempt to make a calculation. So that is the only exception where we only go through step 1 and not step 2. Step 1 being the green cards and step 2 being trying to complete a calculation in the ponds. So that was the only exception. If I successfully catch a fish, I'm not then allowed to also try to catch one in the ponds. And that's it. So now you're ready to play, have fun and enjoy.